Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. The case that I'm going to be looking into today is the case of Amanda Tusing, and I came across this case just sort of scrolling through YouTube, things like that, and I started watching it and I thought it was just such a strange case, so I wanted to share it with you guys. It wasn't suggested, but I just found it so interesting and baffling as to what actually happened to her. So yeah, let's get into the case. If you haven't heard of it, then I would love to know, well, even if you have heard of it, I'd love to know your opinions on it and see what you guys think happened. But yeah, let's get into it. Amanda Tusing was born on the 6th of December in 1979 to parents Susan and Ed in the US. Growing up, she was said to be very intelligent. She had a massive love for animals, and she actually had two brothers, one of which was her twin. They were just a very close-knit family. As she grew up, she was this down-to-earth, always happy woman, full of spunk, full of life, was said to be the life of the party, actually. And she was just very well liked, had a ton of friends, and just a really nice, genuine girl. At the age of 21, she was living in Dell in Arkansas with her parents, and she actually had a boyfriend who a couple of months prior had actually proposed to her. So they were engaged to get married. His name was Matthew Irvin, and they were already planning their wedding for June of 2001. Now, Amanda had dreams of becoming a vet, and Matthew had finished university and was selling insurance. So they were planning their lives together, they were planning their futures together, and they were so in love. It was said that they were practically inseparable. And then all of that was taken away from Amanda in June of 2000. It was the 14th, it was around 11:30. She had spent the day at Matthew's. He lived in Jonesboro in Arkansas, which was just under an hour away from where she lived in Dell. And she'd been there all day and decided that she was going to drive home. Matthew didn't really want her to because there was a heavy rainstorm outside and he was a bit worried. Just said, like, why don't you just stay here, kind of thing. But she actually reminded him that she had work the next morning and that she would be fine driving home. It was like a 40-mile trip. She'd done it many times before. Yeah, okay, it was raining, but she'd be fine. So he said, will you like ring me when you get home so that I know you've got home safe? And she agreed, and then off she went. And Amanda often wouldn't have charge on her phone. She always let it die. It was always dead. So he figured that her phone was probably dead, you know, give her a bit of time to charge it before she actually ended up ringing him. So, you know, an estimate of sort of an hour and 10-15 minutes, something like that, before she was going to ring to say that she was home safe. It got to 1:30, which was now 2 hours later, and Matthew had not received a call of her. So he was a bit worried. He thought that maybe she had just gotten home and fell asleep and forgot. You know, it happens a lot. But he wanted to check. So he rings up the landline, and her mum answers. And he tells her that obviously she was driving home, she was supposed to check in and she hadn't. Could he just make sure that she'd got home safe? So she goes upstairs, checks her bedroom. Amanda isn't there. She goes and looks outside. Amanda's car is also not there. So therefore she hasn't made it home yet. And this was 2 hours later. She tells Matthew, and people begin to panic, thinking, not panic, that they think something foul play has been involved, but they think that maybe she's broken down at the side of the road or something like that. So Ed gets in his car on his end, and Matthew gets in his car on his end, and they decide that they're going to drive down Arkansas 18, which is the route that she would have taken to go home, and basically meet in the middle, all the while looking for Amanda and trying to find her. The route was very much through farmland and a lot of sort of lonely places. So, you know, if she had broken down somewhere where there was nobody around, then maybe she was just, if her phone were dead, maybe she was just literally waiting for somebody to come and help her and come and get her. So that was the worry. Around 1 mile west on Annette, Arkansas 18, Matthew was driving along the road. It was pitch black, and then his lights sort of reveal Amanda's black 1991 Grand AM car. It was pulled over to the side and she was actually parked under a street lamp, like directly under it. And she had gotten about halfway between sort of Matthew's house and her parents' house. And straight away he was thinking she must have broken down. So he pulls up. The keys are still in the ignition. The window wipers are like half sort of on. And she is nowhere to be found. So he rings up Ed, tells him, you know, that he knows where the car is. So they meet and then they end up going back to the car themselves. They jump in. They find that her phone is dead in the passenger seat, which is just normal for Amanda. Her wallet was open on the passenger seat. They had this can of Coke there, which there's a lot of speculation around because the can of Coke was actually still cold and this was summer. So how long had that Coke been sat there for it to still be cold? It was very strange. She hadn't taken it from Matthew's, so she'd bought it along the way or something, or somebody had bought it along the way. And it just, because it was like 2:30 at this point, I think, or 2 a.m. Just why was it still cold? It was just weird. Anyway, they turned on the car because the keys were still in the ignition. And the wipers started wiping and the radio came on. So it was as if Amanda had turned off the car in a hurry, because normally people who get out of the car, okay, maybe not everyone turns off the radio, but a lot of people do turn off the wipers because they're done with them. You know, unless you're in a very rainy place, you're not going to want your wipers dry wiping your windscreen every time you turn your car on. You're going to turn them off and then turn your car off. So it was a bit weird. It was as if she had turned the car off in a hurry, because if you're going to do that and just pull the key out and get out or whatever, then yeah, I can understand why the wipers were still going. And a very, very strange thing, because say she'd pulled over, right? Say it was raining really bad and she pulled over because it was raining too bad, so wait until a bit of it sort of dissipated, and then, you know, I don't know, she turned off the car and she was just waiting. Why, if she got out, why did she leave the car keys in the ignition? There was nothing wrong with that car. It wasn't broken down. It had petrol in it, or fuel, or whatever, diesel, whatever. The battery was going. Everything was fine with the car. So she hadn't broken down. So if she did pull over, why did she then leave the vehicle and leave everything of hers inside of the car? It was very strange. They called the police, obviously. The police came to Amanda's car. They had a look around. And then they fanned out to look for her. Everyone was looking for Amanda. They didn't find anything though. Volunteers came to help look, which were mainly farmers from the area and like a few other members of the community. The search mainly focused on where Amanda's car had been found, but then it did spread out, like they didn't find anything, so they went further and further away. They processed what was inside the car. They didn't really find very much. There was no sign of a struggle, no nothing, so you know, they didn't think that anything had happened to Amanda in that car. They didn't really think that anybody had gone into the car. They found some partial fingerprints, but they couldn't get anything from them. They were that partial that they found 0 matches. They couldn't match it to anything. But that was pretty much it. There was no sign of a scuffle outside of the car. There was no sign of anything. For some strange reason, she had gotten out of that car and then just vanished. Oh, sorry, I believe they found a few hairs actually in the car, but that was pretty much it. Obviously, they've not got a match to that as of yet, I guess. Matthew and Amanda's family printed out flyers. They gave them out everywhere in the hopes that somebody would recognise her, somebody would know something, and that they would just find her, because she just vanished. 3 days later, sadly, she would be found, but not in the way that anybody ever wanted. On the 18th of June 2000, a couple, Trent and Fonda Davis, were on their way home after a trip to Jonesboro, and you know, this was only 3 days later. I don't know whether there was still heavy rainfall or whether it was a heavy rainfall from the day that Amanda went missing. I'm not sure. But they were taking the journey slow because everything was like flooded and wet and, you know, just not great driving conditions. So they slowly drove over these twin bridges on Arkansas 135. And this is when Fonda spotted something bobbing up and down in this sort of water-filled ditch. She told Trent to drive back because she felt like it was a body. And he was like, oh, it's probably just a trash can or whatever. But a trash bag floating up and down in the water. You know, it was dark. Well, I don't know whether it was dark actually. I might be lying there, ignore that one. Maybe it was just a garbage bag. So they go back and he gets out. And it wasn't just a garbage bag. It was a body. He told shouted to Fonda to drive home as quick as she could and call the police because it was in fact a body. And she knew of Amanda's disappearance and figured that the body was most likely Amanda's, which sadly it turned out to be. It was Amanda's body. The area that she was found in was 12 miles away from her car, which was strange because she left the key, she left everything in that car, and then what? She got out of it and then ended up 12 miles away dead in a ditch. This case just boggles the mind, it really does. Police arrived at the scene and they recognised Amanda immediately. They knew it was her for sure. She was fully clothed, there was no obvious wounds anywhere, she didn't have any blood, she didn't have any penetrative injuries, no gunshot wounds, no strangulation marks, absolutely nothing on her body, no defense wounds, there was just nothing. And now, despite her body showing nothing, the circumstances surrounding it were very suspicious, so the missing person investigation went from that to a murder investigation. But the investigators were baffled as I am as well now. Like, it's still crazy. The medical examiner couldn't find any evidence of sexual assault. But again, the cops did think it was foul play because her car was like 12-14 miles away. Why on earth was she found all that distance away? They really didn't think that she'd just got out of the car and walked there. Especially in the middle of the night with heavy rainfall. And what reason did she have? Like, the car was working fine. She had no reason to get out, apart from maybe pull over because the rain was too heavy. But then you just sit in your car, you wait for it to pass, and then you carry on. She had work the next morning. That's why she wanted to go home in the first place. So why on earth would she get out of the car and walk 14 miles? It just didn't make sense. They were going off the theory that maybe she had been suffocated in a way that didn't leave any marks. Like I said, there was no marks on her body apart from this small mark on her head, which wasn't even the kind of mark that could have sort of been attributed to knocking Amanda out. You know, it was just a tiny little thing they didn't think much of, to be honest. So they're thinking that maybe she was strangled and then taken and thrown in that ditch later. But not strangled to the point where she was deceased, maybe just unconscious and then drowned in that water. But that's weird too, because the ME said that her death was consistent with drowning. But they didn't find any water in her lungs whatsoever, only in a nasal passage. So I have read about dry drowning before, and it's been involved in a case before. Whether they're thinking that she dry drowned, I have no idea. But normally, if somebody is alive in water, they end up with water in their lungs and then they drown. But they're saying that she drowned, but she had no water in her lungs. It was very strange. The autopsy went ahead and said that Amanda's death was consistent with drowning, but then that her cause of death was pending. I mean, it's so weird. The police did say that there could have been evidence on her body that had been washed away by the rain or by sitting in the water for as long as she was, which is understandable, but how can somebody, and I mean, if you guys know, please enlighten me, kill somebody else without leaving any marks whatsoever? Like, not even fighting back. If somebody comes up from behind you and starts strangling you, you're going to start punching and kicking. There's going to be marks, there's going to be scratches, there's going to be bruises. There's just going to be. And there was just nothing. I don't understand. I really don't. And because she ended up so far away from her car, they really did believe that foul play was certainly involved. So they went in, like, trying to rule out people around her. They spoke to Matthew, they interviewed him on numerous occasions. He passed polygraphs, things like that. Not that I put much thinking in them, as you guys probably know. But they ruled out him and family as suspects, and they kind of believe that whoever this person was just an opportunist and they didn't even know Amanda at all. They did also rule out that Amanda had taken her own life. They didn't think that she'd done that. And they were basing the main theory off that somebody managed to pull Amanda over on the side of the road. Or Amanda had pulled over on the side of the road because the heavy rainfall made it so that she couldn't see. And then an opportunist saw the car there and then obviously did whatever. But how did they get her out? Like, if someone comes up to the car and tries to get you out of the car, surely you just drive off. Even if it is heavily raining, there's no way I'd be sitting there waiting for him to pull me out. So there's like a really main theory that there was somebody either that needed help. This person may have been a police officer or impersonating a police officer, that they may have pulled Amanda over and gotten her out of the car because her parents and family and everyone were certain that she would have not got out of the car for just anyone. Not for a stranger. So how on earth did this person get her out of the car? There was no evidence of struggle inside, outside, so they didn't drag her out. It was just weird. And this is truly what her parents believe, that somebody was impersonating an officer, or it was an officer, because they actually told her that if anybody ever pulled her over, like an officer or whatever, that she should park under a street lamp, which is exactly what she did, directly under a street lamp. So they thoroughly believe that, with drumming that knowledge into her head, that is exactly what she did, and that somebody who was impersonating someone of importance, like an officer or someone of the law or something like that, was involved in her case. They looked into everything. They did over like 200 interviews, but they were just no closer to finding the truth. Like I said, there was nothing on her body, there was no marks, there was no DNA evidence, there was nothing in the car. They really do believe that her killer was an opportunist. The FBI got involved at some point, and they came forward and did a profile and said that this was most likely a white male, 50 years old, and lived in the area of where her body was found, like close by, which was like 2 towns, tiny towns, 5 minutes away. And the annoying thing is that they could have gone to these towns and probably tested everyone's DNA, but they didn't have any DNA to test it again. So that's just really frustrating, because most of like everything around was farmland, and so, you know, those were the closest places, unless they lived in one of the farmhouses, which there wasn't that many of them either around that area. They looked into the police theory so much that they ended up sort of interviewing all of their officers and doing polygraph tests on them all, but they didn't come up with anything of that either. They didn't sort of gain any suspects from that. So if it was an officer, either they were a very good liar, or it wasn't in their department, and all the departments that they interviewed, so it could have been somebody outside, or it could have just been an impersonator. Eventually the case went very cold, but then in 2003 somebody sent some tip through to say that before Amanda was buried, somebody left a note on her, or in her coffin, stating who her killer could have been, or that could have led to the killer. They went off this information, they exhumed her body and her coffin, and they found no such note. So either the person lied, or it just, I don't know, they must have lied, right? This note didn't exist anyway. What truly happened to Amanda Tusing remains a mystery up to this day. Her family, of course, still holding on to the hope that one day, you know, they will find out what happened to her, who did this, why they did this. And if anybody knows anything, please do come forward, because it's been 22 years now and Amanda has not seen any justice. Her family just have this massive gaping hole in their lives, and they have no idea who did this, and it is just so heartbreaking. Amanda Tusing needs justice, and so does her family, but as of yet, her case remains unsolved. But yeah, that's the end of the video. If you guys have enjoyed it, please give me a big thumbs up, subscribe to the channel for similar content. Anyway, that's all I have today on the case of Amanda Tusing. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye!